in just a moment, Pastor Chris De Monye will come up here and he will bring an incredible word. He's all the way from BC, from Langley specifically, but you just call it Vancouver. And so he is here because he's originally from here. And man, we met when I was doing youth ministry years ago. And we just have stayed in touch. And he's a great friend, a great guy, a good dad. He's a pastor, phenomenal preacher, communicator. He's smart and funny. I was telling the 9 a.m. service, usually God gives you one or the other. You get to be smart or funny, and he's got both. I'm neither. He's got both, and so, but he's just a gift. He's a gift to me and the church that he comes from. He's on the leadership team of an amazing church called Village Church. And it is a move of God. One of the fastest growing churches in Canada, one of the largest churches in Canada. So many baptisms and salvations is crazy. It is a move. So to have you here to invest in this house, it truly is an honor. And so one of the things that we do as a church, when the man or the woman of God comes to bring the word, we give honor where honor is due. We could do that in many ways, but one of the ways that we're going to do that today is by putting our hands together, clapping and cheering. So let's practice that. Let's put our hands together and welcome Pastor Chris to the platform to bring the word.
Can we continue to give honor to Pastor Mark and Pastor Roberta for everything that they do? Man, Mark, I've been a fan of you guys since your youth days. Are you kidding? Riverwood Church Community was the church that my wife and I went from across the country to BC to get my master's in divinity. We thought it was like a season of preparation. We did not know what God had for us there. And he had a lot of beautiful things. But what I'm so encouraged by is that there are churches like Rose Church who love a city that I love and are pouring their lives out to see people here who don't know Jesus come to know, trust, and follow the only one who can save them, the only one who can give them hope and purpose and meaning and value and eternity in his presence. And so I am honored to be in your house. So thank you so much for having me, guys. Listen, I am going to make you high five people. You can sit down and take a seat. But yeah, I am from Winnipeg. Like this was my adult life was here, which was really awesome. It was home for me for a long time. I mean, God's providence in the midst of it, it's amazing. Like I met my wife here in Winnipeg. We were working at the St. Vital Cineplex. Well, you remember famous players? That's what we were. I was a famous player. No, I'm just kidding. Famous players. And it was God's hand in it. I would sell the tickets. She would rip them. So you can imagine, I mean, that was just ordained to happen, which is really beautiful. We moved out to BC about 13 years ago. Before that, I was a probation officer on Gary Street for the province of Manitoba, a social worker. And God called me and my wife through a series of things to move to the West Coast and kind of get trained up in what it would be like with pastoral ministry. We didn't know what it turned into, but it's turned into a huge, beautiful journey of following God's grace and trying to just be faithful to what he's calling us to. Isn't that the aim of the Christian life? Like, at the end of it, to love Jesus more and to have been faithful. Like, it's well done, good and faithful servant. And so that's kind of the aim of our lives and everything we do. And just honored that I get a chance to even come home and preach to your community like this. Other things about me, just real quick. I have 4 sons. My wife and I, we chased the girl and didn't find her. And after you have 4, you got to close shop at some point. So, we did that, and then that's that. So, yeah, so pray for my wife. There's 5 boys and her. She is grace and peace embodied, the best person I've ever met. If I didn't have her, I would spend my life looking for her. And 20 years, fell in love in Winnipeg 20 years ago. So just incredible. Yeah, it's wild coming to church and being given the topic of hell, okay? That's a real easy one, easy to step into. But I want us to approach it with like a little bit of humility, okay? Here's why. Whether you've been from a different background in church or whether you come from different areas of the culture, different ideas of what you think hell is, all of us have this kind of image that we've put together, and sometimes we hold these images really hard. And some of the doctrine of the church is quite mysterious. It's hard to understand. Now, there will be some real truths that we're able to really like lean into and hold on to, but I want us to kind of come in with some humility. Can we do that? Like, my oldest son, he's 14 years old, going to a public school, and he's starting to meet some Christians who are in there. His dad, there's these Christians who are kind of coming out of the woodwork. I'm getting to meet some friends. They love Jesus too. I said, awesome. How's it been? He's like, great, except for one kid. I said, why? He's like, he told me I'm not a Christian. I said, why did he tell you you're not a Christian? He's like, because I believe dinosaurs existed. I said, did you tell him your dad's a pastor? He's like, no. I said, good. I don't want to deal with that kid. Don't tell him. But like, sometimes we make these things that aren't the major point of like the doctrine of the church like how hell will be experienced or what it is. It's an important question, and we're going to get some truth out of it. But could we just come in open-handed to this conversation? Is that okay as we do that as a community? I appreciate that. Because we have to be honest that we have been discipled by more than the Bible on hell. Whether it be like, 14th century poetry like Dante and the Inferno, like what that looked like, and where it's just like torture and layer upon torture and layer upon torture to specific sins for all of time in this fiery torture chamber. I made the mistake a couple months ago. I go to a monastery on a hill once every 2 weeks, and I just sit there and read, and I put Interstellar on my headphones, and I just sat in this cathedral and read Dante's Inferno. Bad decision. If you want good dreams, don't do that. But it's interesting because is that what Jesus was talking about when he talked about hell? Or maybe it's like you've watched K-pop Demon Hunters and you're like, oh man, maybe some of the mythology around this or the shamanism that's coming from Korea is actually something that actually maybe presents what hell is. Or maybe you come from a background like Buddhism where you're thinking maybe it's a karmic system and we can have chance after chance after chance to get it right and grow into this. Maybe you don't believe hell exists at all. And a lot of the community around you would probably believe that. That when someone dies, the common refrain, regardless of what a faith background or experience they might have, would be, at least they're in a better place. Does the Bible preach that? You see, I don't want us to look at any other authority but the authority of Jesus. Jesus is the head of the church, the firstborn of all creation. You look to Colossians 1, and it says that, not that he was created, but the firstborn over all things, meaning in authority, Jesus is meant to be the head. And so if we're trying to have an understanding of a doctrine of hell, to build a theology of what it means, I know for my life, I do not want to have a theology that is shaped by culture. I don't want to have a theology that's shaped by entertainment or mythology or like whatever shamanism. I want one that is built on the Bible, the true word of God, and the words of Jesus specifically. Because that is God with us. He didn't leave us off to try and figure it out. He entered into the story and explained a ton of things, some still mysterious. But did you know that Jesus talked more about hell than he did heaven? The good place people think you go to, with all the clouds and the Philly cheese cream, the angels and the bows. He talked about hell a lot more than he did heaven. So what did Jesus talk about hell, and what did he say? A few things to help us get an understanding of what hell is. Matthew 5, he talks and warns that anger, lust, sin can lead to hellfire or being cast into hell. In Matthew 8, 22, 25, he describes hell as a place of outer darkness with weeping and gnashing of teeth. Jesus advises to fear God who can destroy both soul and body in hell. He refers to hell as a furnace of fire where lawbreakers are thrown. He takes Pharisees and asks them, how can they escape the damnation of hell? He calls it an eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels and eternal punishment. Jesus describes it as a place where the worms do not die and the fire is not quenched. He warns again to fear the one who has power to cast into hell. In this parable, the story of a rich man and Lazarus, Jesus depicts the rich man in hell being in torment and flames. And he refers to the gates of hell. People take Jesus' words sometimes and like, well, did he mean that? Because he used this word Gehenna. And Gehenna is a place, and it's outside of Jerusalem, and it's a spot that's a valley that used to be like a trash dump. But before it was a trash dump, it was a place where kings and other idol worshipers would actually go and like sacrifice children to Moloch. Like this weird place that God, through Jeremiah, ended up cursing and staying, and now is this trash heap outside. And so Jesus would use that word as an example to say, hell's going to be like that. Not just specifically talking about hell is that. Hell's going to be like that. And that's interesting because Jesus did that all the time, didn't he? Like he would use the surroundings to teach truths about God so that people who are fishermen and lay people, because it's not like the Bible's not just for educated folk. Praise God, or I wouldn't be in it. I wouldn't be able to understand. Like the gospel can be so simple and yet so complex. And theologians love to argue about that, right? You ever see that thing where Bob Goff's arguing with John Piper? And John Piper's like, you're watering down the gospel. And Bob Goff's like, well, at least then people will drink it. I'm like, and they're both right. It's super complex, but it's beautifully simple. So when Jesus is at the Sea of Galilee, where like these mustard bushes grow wild, and he takes a seed and says, faith of a mustard seed. He's not saying your faith is a mustard seed. He's saying it's about what you put your faith in, not the size of your faith that counts. Even a little bit of faith in a strong branch when you're falling to your death will save your life. But strong faith in a weak branch, you'll fall to your death. And so Jesus is clarifying for us. He's saying, hey, this is important. There is somewhere where torment and anguish and pain and suffering could be the inevitable outcome for people who are trying to do their best just to navigate the world. That there's a greater story going on here of one who actually saves people from a default damnation that they have because of the sin that is in their life. Rose Church, do you believe that in this space right now, outside of it, driving through Transcona, there are people every day driving by that are going to die and go to hell? And this gives urgency to the church. This is Jesus warning the church, saying, don't believe that it's all good and rosy on the other side. You need a Savior, and His name is Jesus. You need hope, and it's found in Jesus. You now need to be part of that. And why is it so important? Because there's so much that Jesus goes into where He's talking about like all of these different pictures of heaven and hell, like the bosom of Abraham. He's not saying in heaven you're going to be up in Abraham's bosom all the time. You're like, what's a bosom? Don't Google it. Ask someone who knows. That's safer. But He's going to it's peace, it's safety. He's trying to get these things out. And so these, when you think of hell, there's some things we know in the midst of it. We know through Jesus' words clearly that hell is real. And we know that hell is forever. And so how do we operate in the world knowing these things? Because this is a wild thing. This is a big question for a lot of people. You know, Oxford recently just came out with a study, and the study showed that 100% of people will die. Mind-blowing, right? 100%. And so it's like everybody's going to be faced in one time or another in this space. Life is just a blip, short. But in this life, you have to make a decision of where you will put your hope, of where you will put your safety, of where you will put your eternity. And that decision matters, not just for the little bit of life you're going to live, the life where no one knows the beginning and the end of. You do not know if today will be your last day. And that's not to make you fearful, but to make you focused. Because on the line is an eternity that extends into forever, and where you end up is important. And so sometimes you wonder, because it doesn't feel right. I've been pastoring for 13 years. I had a woman come into my church in the morning, and she was just bawling because that morning she found her son dead on the floor of her living room. And she came in just weeping, telling me, tell me he's in heaven. Tell me he's in heaven. Because we long to know that people are in a better place. When we think of hell, we think of, man, whether it's absolute separation from God for eternity and all the goodness that He is, this outer darkness where the light never shines in, or whether it's hellfire and torment, whatever your view is on that, you don't want to go there. And when we feel like someone might, we feel like that's not where they should be. At least generally for the people you love. And why is that? Because that almost reflects how we feel just about life, doesn't it? Have you ever felt like this world isn't your home? You ever felt like you look around the worldscape right now, you look around, this is not feeling like it should be. When you see people who are made in the image of God degraded and hurt and abandoned and take dignity stolen from them, you say that's not what it's supposed to be like. And so what does the church do? It rises up to engage with the world and bring the kingdom of Jesus here today. But also we recognize our home is with God. That's where we're always meant to be. There's this beautiful thing in the beginning of the Bible, the book of Genesis talks about where God begins to create. God the Father, the Spirit, the Son, in perfect community before you and I ever existed, worshiping one another, encouraging one another, loving one another, perfect relationship. And out of that relationship, creativity flows, and they decide to make a whole bunch of things, don't they? They speak, let there be light, and there's light, darkness. There's the earth and the sky, the heavens. There's all the animals and fish and birds and creepy, crawly things that you don't want to see in your basement. And all these things exist, and then He makes humanity. He begins with Adam. And all throughout the story, it's this is good, this is good, this is good, this is good. And then Adam's there in the garden, and it's like, whoa, not good. What? It's not good that man should be alone. And every man in the room is saying, amen. So he made that man a woman, and then you have Adam and Eve in the garden with God, and he looks at it and says, very good, very good. Humanity in the cool of the day, walking with God in his presence, in the garden, perfect. But humanity was deceived. And in that moment, there was a separation that happened between God and humanity, where humanity sinned against God. And it wasn't just that they broke a rule, but something happened in them where they were now defined by something called sin, that is the brokenness of humanity, defined by something else, and that changed the course of their trajectory, not to a place when you think of, oh, is it just hell or heaven? That's a simple definition. A greater, more biblical definition is the presence who you'll be with. They went from being in the presence of a holy God to being cast out where they could no longer be. Like, why is this important? We have to understand, if we're going to understand why hell is what hell is, where we think, how can a good God, send somebody away for eternity? We have to actually understand the character and holiness and uniqueness and otherness of God. Because if we don't capture the unique holiness of God, we will never understand our place in the story. The Bible is not about you. The Bible is about God. Your life is not about you. Your life is about giving God glory in everything you do. It's all for Jesus, everything. And so when Isaiah gets this vision of the Lord, listen to what it says. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to the other and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is filled with his glory. And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, for I am lost. For I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. You know what the Bible consistently tells you to do? It tells you to get your eyes off yourself in the world and get your eyes on him. Get your eyes on the heavenly places where Christ is seated above. Get your eyes there. Why? Because when you have an understanding of God, you can begin to have an understanding of yourself. When you see the holiness of God, you realize how unholy you are. When you see the holiness of God, woe is me that you would, how could I, you're like the sun. Like, how could I even approach the surface of the sun without being torn up? And yet we get these glimpses of God's kindness, where we get like a space, like when we're worshiping here, and we join into the eternal worship of the Father, the Spirit, and the Son, and we sing and are invited in to sing goodness about God to God. We enter into it. And when you give your life to Jesus, what happens? The Spirit of God indwells you, and he's actually living in you. Like, all of it, you realize, and the Spirit then he encourages and edifies and grows, but he also convicts, because he's preparing you to be with a holy God. If you have this view of God as holy, it's like you look through the Bible and you see even when angels approach people, one of the first two things they always say is either get up or don't be afraid. Why? Because even in the angel's presence, people feel unworthy. They drop to the ground. Whoa, what is this? Chill. I'm a messenger. In God's presence, how much more? And we realize then even a verse like Romans 3:23, where it's like, for all have fallen short of the glory of God. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That all of us. And the glory is like his holiness radiating from him. And the world's full of it. When you experience a gift from a friend or a warm hug, that's the glory of God you're experiencing. When you're experiencing dignity given to you or given to others who deserve it, simply because they were made in his image, that's his glory being shown. That's how you glorify God. When you give, expecting nothing in return, like don't let your left hand know, you practice secrecy, the discipline of it. It's like, this is the glory of God. When you're driving in and the big Winnipeg sky is filled with a sunrise, that's the glory of God. The glory of God is all over the place, and yet You see, you were meant to always have been in heaven with Jesus, in the garden with Jesus, in his space. But in the midst of the story, there is a deceiver. Who does it say that hell is actually made for? Is it made for people like us? Jesus was very clear that it's actually made for the devil and his angels. It was not made for us. And yet it's where we'll end up being. And as you think about like what he wants to do along the way, we have so many things that distract us from the clarity that Jesus is trying to give us in these pages. It's like I get to do a ton of weddings. I've done over 160 of them. It is like I am so weddinged out. I hope I never get invited to another one. Like, it's beautiful, but I'm just done. I'm done. But I was doing this one wedding for an old couple, and they were like in a garden, and they were sitting to the left side, and it was a beautiful garden, quaint little spot, beautiful White House. And she had her veil down. And as I was like preaching and waxing eloquently about marriage and their life together, these bees were all over the place and kept flying up into her veil. Problem was she was like deathly allergic to bees. So you can imagine the distraction. Some people didn't get it because they didn't know. Oh, just these bees flying up there. Okay, let's try and keep the show going. But it's like, no, we got to deal with these bees. You know, the church is pretty similar to that, where it's like a lot of us have bees in the veil of our lives when we recognize as the church, we are Christ's bride to whom he is coming back to restore all things and be with forever. And we're sitting there on the side waiting for our bridegroom to come with bees in the veil, and we're sometimes like, oh, cute fuzzy bees. They can kill you. The distraction can kill you. Religion can be a distraction, where you can come to church, give your money, be in the Bible, and never fall in love with Jesus and end up in hell for eternity. Scary verses like that exist in the Bible where they come and say, all the things I did for you. And he says, depart from me, I never knew you. So what is it then? How do we get reconciled? What do we step into? And when we think about hell this way, and we think about all the things that could like draw us there or the damnation, I mean, this is the moment where like once you really build up the hell story, if I had a campfire here, I'd throw gasoline on it. I'd be like, now turn or burn. Maybe you've seen that or heard that. But you know what's interesting about that? That's not what Jesus says. Listen to what Jesus says instead. He says, I tell you, my friends, do not fear those who kill the body and after have nothing more that they can do, but I will warn you whom to fear. Fear him who, after he is killed, has authority to cast into hell. There's a lot of people, even one theologian, he said it this way, he said, hell is worse than the worst physical pain you can have in life, and that's true. A lot of people try and leverage that fear, but heaven won't be full of people who are scared of hell. Heaven will be full of people who love Jesus. It's not going to be packed with people who are worried about where they could go. It's going to be packed with people who love the King who saves people who are doomed and destined for damnation for eternity. Jesus Christ the King. That's the good news of the gospel in the midst of it. And why does he say fear God? Well, the Bible tells us the fear of God is the beginning of all wisdom. What is it like to fear God? To be scared of him? No, but to get a sense of his holiness, his otherness, his perfect justice, his incredible mercy, his love for a broken world. When you get a picture of who God is and understand who you are, woe is me, except for now Jesus has had made a way. Who am I to be close to you? What if Rose Church was the church in Winnipeg to capture the holiness of God? To capture and be in awe of him? That when you step in this room, we're not simply talking about church movement. We're talking about like the manifest presence of God in a space to transform lives, heal the sick, break chains, free people, and then send them out on mission. And Pastor Mark's going to talk more about that because I'm not supposed to. But this is the mission of the church. It's not about fearing or being scared of hell. When you have the holiness of God, he is separate, other than, uniqueness that forms him. One pastor defines God's holiness like this. God's holiness is his infinite value as the absolutely unique, morally perfect, permanent person that he is, and who by grace made himself accessible. Made himself accessible. Well, what do we do then in the midst of all our brokenness? Do we simply believe, or what is the purpose of how does this happen? How does it work then? If eternal hell, conscious torment, conscious separation from God for eternity exists, and I'm broken and woe is me, how do I step in? You know, there's something called the passive and the active obedience of Jesus. His active obedience was his perfect life for you. How when Jesus came to earth, he lived a perfect life that you could not. Absolutely, you could not. He was tempted. He was given. He just did not sin. He lived a perfect life. That was his active obedience. His passive obedience was that he went to the cross, took on sin, and died in your place. Now, many men have died claiming to be a Messiah, but one man in the history of the world came back to life, proving it was true. That 3 days later, death could not hold him, and he broke free from the grave, leaving sin and Satan and shame and death all behind. How do you know it was paid for? Because he came back to life. I mean, think about it. You eat a delicious meal. If you try to walk out of a restaurant, what's going to happen? They're going to stop you. And they're going to stop you, and they're going to be like, hey, you got to pay for that. How do we know that Jesus paid for us? It's because the wages of sin were death, and death could not hold him because it was paid in full. And so there's this experience here now where if you picture a courtroom and you see Christ on one side and he's sitting there with a file about his life and perfection, and that file's empty, no wrongdoing against him. And you have God as the judge, a perfect character. And you look over, and then you look at your own file, and you're like, what the heck? Like, I got sin after sin after sin. Anybody else with me on that? Any perfect people in the room? If you raise your hand, you're a liar. You got a file too. Okay, sin after sin after sin. Things that I wish I didn't do. Things that I did in active rebellion. Mistakes I've made. Things that I can just tell. I got my file. I can see that I'm unholy. And then Jesus, before the gavel comes down and says, guilty at me, he's like, psst, hey, yo, give me your file. I'm sorry, what? Yeah, give me your file. No, you can't. Now that I got an understanding give me your file. Okay, so you take your file and you give it to him, and he's like, no, everything. Oh, but Jesus, I got a couple things I was hiding. I'm taking these to the grave. I haven't even been able to confess them to you to own them. No, I want all of it. Yeah, even the one I hid in my son, I want all of it. And then he gives you his file, which is perfect and blameless. And then when the gavel comes down, God looks at you and says, innocent, free from hell, free from damnation, because he who knew no sin became sin so that you could become the righteousness of God. That's what you carry as a saint of Jesus now. His righteousness, his active obedience, his passive obedience, all of it comes onto you. That's the imputation of Christ, where you get his goodness bestowed upon you. And what did God do next? When Jesus resurrected from the dead, he ascended back into heaven. But he said, I'm going to send one to you. And on the day of Pentecost, the Holy Spirit dropped on the church and absolutely changed the future and the trajectory, because now the Spirit of God dwells in his people. The Spirit of God. Sorry, I'm getting jacked up. This is life change. This is supernatural. This is incredible. This is not a joke. This is not an good idea for your life. This is the active living Word of God, like the Spirit of God indwelling you. And where's Jesus? Seated at the right hand of the Father, doing what? Interceding on our behalf. Picture this. Spirit of God in you saying, hey, love Christ, eyes on Christ, love Christ, eyes on Christ. That stuff of the world, get rid of it. Eyes on him, eyes on him. I'm convicting you because I love you. Eyes on him, eyes on him. And then you got Jesus next to God being like, yo, you see that one? That one's mine. And God's not like, oh, I'm holding back my wrath. He's like, yeah, I love that one. That one's mine. I love that one. That one's mine. Okay. No, I love that one too. And when someone gives their life to Jesus, this big party breaks out in heaven because everybody's stoked. Everybody's jacked. This is incredible. The truth, when we think about hell is that it's real, it's eternal. That should give us some urgency in how we live with people we love and people we don't. Because what should we be doing for our enemies? Praying for them? And not just some of those weird prayers in the psalm where it's like kick them in the teeth, like thrash them, throw. No, pray love. Pray that God would change their hearts. Pray transformation. Don't let hell be the thing that instigates your love for Jesus. Maybe it's something that causes you to refocus, not in fear, but in focus. So your eyes can be on him, so your affection for him grows, because that's the thing that's going to save you. And just know that in the midst of it, man, it is such a joy. Like, God's just not sitting here mad at you because of your humanity. He's not afraid of your humanness. He's not afraid to meet you right where you are and say, hey, you're now mine. I don't care what you've done, who you've done, where you've been, what you've been up to. The plan was you're with me for now and forever, so let's walk that out. And your life will change forever because of it. I'm going to ask you to stand to your feet. And the reason I'm going to ask you to stand to your feet is because I want to give an opportunity today. For some of you, the opportunity will be to, for the first time in your life, actually give Jesus your life. To actually say, God, not because I'm afraid of hell, but because I love you, I want to live all my days for you in a way I never have before. To actually lean into that relationship. I don't know if you're like me. I grew up in church, and guess what I learned? How to be a great hypocrite. I learned how to play the church game. I could do anything I just knew exactly what people needed to hear. But when God changed my life at 25 years old, everything had to change. I tell you, people didn't understand it, but they didn't need to. Because I serve a greater purpose. I serve an audience of one. And so I got to enter in and just follow Jesus, try to be faithful to him, and my family, my wife's on board. Like, he just changed our lives like crazy. It was incredible. But God has no grandchildren. Your parents' faith won't save you. If you've been coming to church for a long time, you can be as religious as you want. It's all about Jesus and what he's done. Give your life to him. So maybe you're taking a step like that. And for others of us, we've just gotten distracted, man. There's been some bees in the veil that have taken our attention. And we see them as fuzzy little cuties, but no, these things will kill you. Your sin is not a pet. Your desire for the world is not something to be entertained. Get your eyes back on Jesus. And so